Reed Richards came back into his body, the way a radio comes back into signal. Static first, then sense, then panic. He was on his back on broken asphalt that smelled of motor oil and rust, and something sweetish underneath that he would later learn was spilled Vought brand energy drink, the kind sold in machines on every corner of this city. Above him the sky had the wrong color of orange. Sodium light bouncing off smog he didn't recognize, and the first conscious thought that assembled itself in his mind was not where am I but when, because the equation should not have done this. The field should have collapsed inward, not outward, not far enough to scatter 4 bodies into 4 different coordinates entirely. He sat up too fast and his vision swam. He was in a scrapyard, chain link fencing rising on 3 sides, stacks of crushed car husks taller than he was, and beyond the fence a skyline that was almost New York, almost his New York, except the buildings wore advertisements he had never seen, 40 stories of a woman's face mid-law, white teeth captioned in letters 6 feet tall. Homelander sees you and approves. Reed stared at it, the way a man stares at a word in his own language that has been spelled wrong his entire life without him noticing. There was no rift behind him, no shimmer, no after-image, no seam in the air he could point a sensor at. Whatever had thrown him here had already closed the door and swept the welcome mat. He checked his hands, his ribs, the elastic give of his own forearm when he flexed it absently. A habit older than the accident that gave him the ability, and confirmed at least that he was whole, that the power had traveled with him, which meant the others' powers likely had too, which meant Johnny was a fire hazard wherever he'd landed, and Ben was, God help whoever found him first, exactly as breakable looking as he was not. A drone passed overhead. Not military, not anything from a register Reed kept in his head out of professional habit. Civilian-grade chassis, consumer plastic, a swiveling lens with a blue ring of light around it, and stenciled along its belly in friendly rounded font. Vought News, we see everything, so you don't have to. It paused above him for 2 full seconds, lens tilting, the universal language of a machine deciding whether a thing was worth flagging. Reed went very still, the way he had taught himself to go still around anything that might be cataloging him, and the drone moved on, uninterested, which told him 2 things at once. Surveillance here was ambient, woven into the air itself, rather than reserved for choke points, and a man sitting alone in a junkyard at 3 in the morning did not register as anomalous enough to follow. That second fact unsettled him more than the first. A world this watched should have flagged him instantly. The fact that it hadn't meant the bar for strange was set somewhere far above where he currently stood. He climbed the fence rather than phase through it, an old discipline. Conserve the unusual for when the usual fails, and dropped onto an access road slick with a night's rain. A man was sitting on an overturned bucket near the gate, a thermos in both hands, watching Reed with the patient, unbothered expression of someone who had seen stranger things climb out of that yard than a soot-streaked man in a lab coat. "You one of Vaught's?" the man asked, not unkindly, the way someone asks if you take cream. "I'm sorry?" "The coat. Figured you fell out of one of their trucks." "Happens. They runs experiments out past the channel sometimes. Things go sideways. Somebody ends up walking around looking like you do right now." He took a drink. "You're not gonna sue me for staring, are you? Some of you do that. Sign something before you even talk." Reed understood, in the space of that single sentence, more about this world than any amount of physics could have told him. There was an entire economy here built around the expectation of the impossible walking out of trucks, an entire vocabulary for it, contracts and lawsuits, and a company name spoken the way other men speak of weather systems, inevitable, ambient, something you didn't fight, only forecasted around. He had crossed an unknown number of realities in less time than it took to fall asleep. And the first rule this one had handed him, unprompted, free of charge, was, "Here, the extraordinary is owned by somebody, and you will be asked, sooner rather than later, who owns you." "No trucks," Reed said carefully. "I'm not signing anything." The man shrugged, entirely unsurprised, and went back to his thermos. And Reed Richards stood at the mouth of a scrapyard in a city, wearing his city's face like a mask, with no team, no tower, no equation that explained how to get home, and only one certainty holding steady in the wreckage of the last 10 minutes. Wherever Sue and Johnny and Ben had landed, the clock on finding them safely had already started running, and somewhere above him, a smiling 40-story face had just become the most important piece of intelligence he owned. If you love deep dive crossovers that respect both worlds, smash, subscribe, and comment your dream matchup. We're building the multiverse one story at a time. Reed Richards versus a city that already owns every hero in it. Where should we send the rest of the 4 next? Ben Grimm woke up underwater, which was its own kind of miracle, because rock does not float, and rock should not be able to claw its way up through 8 feet of harbor silt without drowning a man inside it, except Ben had stopped being a man whose lungs mattered the same way 10 years ago, and some habits the body keeps, even when the body itself is mostly memory of what skin used to feel like. He broke the surface of the East River, in a part of the city he didn't recognize, hauled himself up a rusted ladder bolted to a pier, and sat there dripping for a long minute, watching the water sheet off orange hide that was, infuriatingly, exactly the same color and texture it had always been. Because apparently, whatever physics had thrown him across realities hadn't bothered to throw him a favor along with it. 2 dock workers found him before he'd even gotten his breath back. He braced for the usual, the flinch, the phone coming up, somebody's voice going thin and careful the way voices do around a thing they've decided to be afraid of. Instead, the older one whistled, low and appreciative, like he was looking at a used truck with decent mileage. "That a costume?" the man asked. "Or you actually?" "It's actually," Ben said. Because lying about that particular fact had never once worked in his favor, not in any version of his life he could remember living. The younger one already had his phone out, but not calling anyone. Filming. "Bro, you gotta see this is gonna blow up." He turned the camera on himself for a second, grinning. "Found a real one, found a real deal soup down by Pier 6. Dude looks like the thing from that one movie, no cap." "I am not from a movie," Ben said, with the specific weariness of a man who had said variations of that sentence in front of cameras for the better part of a decade and had never once been believed. Nah, I mean, you got a name? Powers? You licensed?" The kid said licensed the way you'd ask if someone had a car registration, casual, procedural, a question with an obvious right answer that he was only asking out of politeness. License for what? Both men looked at him like he'd asked what air was for. "To be a soup," the older one said slowly, like maybe the fall into the river had knocked something loose. "You gotta be registered or Vought sends people, FBSA. You don't want to deal with FBSA, trust me. My cousin got pulled in for unregistered glow eyes. 3 days, came out different." Ben had spent a long time learning to read a room, even when the room was looking at him like a carnival attraction. And what he read in this one was a kind of bureaucracy he had never once encountered back home, where being strong or strange or impossible came bundled with paperwork, the way a car comes bundled with a title, and the absence of that paperwork wasn't freedom, it was exposure. Back home, the world had learned to live with the 4 the way you live with weather. You didn't love it, you respected it, you adjusted. Here the world had apparently decided, collectively and a long time ago, that the impossible was a product line, and a product without a barcode was a problem looking for an owner. He didn't have papers. He didn't have a company. He had, as far as anyone in this city was concerned, fallen sideways out of nothing, which made him either the most dangerous man on this pier or the most valuable, and Ben Grimm had lived enough years on the wrong end of that math to know which way it usually broke. "I'm not licensed," he said, flat, daring either of them to make something of it. The kid's grin only widened, phone still rolling. "Okay, but that's even better. That's like an exclusive, bro. You got any idea what Vought pays for first contact with an unregistered?" He stopped himself, recalculating in real time, the particular look of a man doing arithmetic on someone else's body. "You should call them yourself, actually. Get ahead of it. Better you reach out than they come find you. That's what happened to my cousin's friend. And trust me, you do not want them finding you first." Ben said nothing, because the smart move, the only move, was to get off this pier before that footage finished uploading. Before some algorithm somewhere decided his face was worth attaching a logo to. He'd had exactly one life where the world looked at him and saw a story before it saw a man, and he had not enjoyed it the first time around. He stood, water still running off him in sheets, and the older dockworker actually stepped back, not in fear this time, but in something closer to reverence, the specific deference reserved here. Ben was beginning to understand, less for things that might be worth money. "Where's downtown from here?" Ben asked, because if the world insisted on being made of buildings, he wanted at least to know which ones to avoid. And because somewhere in this city, unless the math had failed him worse than he feared, Reed was already 3 steps into figuring out the same terrible lesson, that in this place the first question anyone asked wasn't "Who are you?" It was "What's your number?" Johnny Storm had been awake for exactly 4 minutes before he set a hot dog cart on fire. And in his defense, it was an accident born entirely of relief. The specific giddy overcorrection of a man who falls out of the sky onto a boardwalk and discovers, to his immense satisfaction, that he can still fly. He'd come down hard over Coney Island, hit the sand at a controlled burn, instead of a crater, because some instinct in him had flared before his brain caught up, and the first thing he'd done once he confirmed. He had all his limbs was punch straight up into the night sky just to feel the old rush of it, trailing flame like a comet, whooping loud enough that a cluster of teenagers below him had started filming before he'd even landed again. He came down grinning, because Johnny Storm grinning was a reflex independent of context, and the teenagers did not run. That was the first wrong note. Back home, a fireball over a beach at midnight cleared a crowd in under a minute. Here, 3 different phones converged on him immediately, and one kid actually shouted, "Yo, do the spin thing again," like Johnny was a fireworks display he'd paid for. "You're like an actual flame guy," a girl said, awestruck, already typing something with her thumbs without looking down. "Are you new? Did Vought just drop you? Is this a launch?" "A launch," Johnny repeated, delighted by the word without understanding it yet. Like a reveal. "They do that. New soup drops out of nowhere, big splash. Then a week later there's a billboard and a Funko and a Netflix doc. You're gonna be huge, my followers are gonna lose it." She finally looked up. "What's your soup name?" "Human Torch." She winced, sympathetic. "Oof, that's gonna get you sued, dude. That's basically Torch from the old Vought comics line. They own that. They'll make you change it before the ink dries on your contract." Johnny had approximately 9 seconds of pure happiness before the sentence fully landed, and then it landed all at once, the way a wave landed: contract, comics, billboard, launch. He looked around at the crowd properly for the first time, and understood that none of them were afraid of him, not because they trusted him, but because they had a category for him already built and waiting, a slot with his name halfway filled in before he'd said a word, and that slot apparently came stapled to a brand deal. "Nobody owns my name," he said, lighter than he meant it, because some part of him was still riding the high of flight and hadn't caught up to the rest of him yet. "Everybody's name gets owned eventually," the girl said, not unkindly, the way you'd explain taxes to a kid. "That's just how it works. You're either Vorts or you're nothing. There's no third lane. Unless you want to be one of those weirdo unregistered guys hiding in basements. But those guys end up on the news for the wrong reasons." It was at that exact moment that the hot dog cart caught a stray ember from Johnny's earlier showboating, finally finding the propane line it had been smoldering near for the last 2 minutes, and the resulting whomp of orange light scattered the crowd at last, screaming and laughing in equal measure, phones still up the entire time they ran. Johnny doused it fast, more embarrassed than alarmed, and turned to apologize to the cart's owner, a heavy-set man already on the phone, already talking fast. "No, I'm serious. Right in front of me, full-on Torch cosplay, except it's not cosplay. The thing's real. My cart's toast. I want this on record before some lawyer." The man caught Johnny watching him and didn't lower his voice at all. Didn't flinch, just kept talking, the practiced cadence of a man who had filed insurance claims against acts of God before, and knew exactly how to file one against an act of Supes. "Yeah, he's standing right here." "No, I'm not going to touch him. Are you insane? You don't touch a live one. I learned that." Johnny stood there, flame banked back down to nothing, and felt for the first time in his memory something he hadn't expected to feel from being seen on fire in public. Small. Back home, fire was wonder. Here, fire was a line item, a claim number, a clip already looping somewhere with ad reads stitched in before the upload even finished buffering. He lifted off the sand slowly this time. No flourish, no comet trail. Just enough lift to clear the boardwalk and put some skive between himself and the cameras. And as the lights of Coney Island shrank below him, he found himself doing something he rarely bothered with, thinking before acting. Somewhere in this city, his brother-in-law was presumably also waking up confused. And Sue and Ben and whatever Reed's plan turned out to be, it had better account for the fact that in this world, being extraordinary wasn't a secret you kept. It was a product you hadn't signed away yet, and apparently everybody here already knew the only 2 outcomes once you were spotted. Get bought or get buried. Sue Storm had landed soft, on her feet, in an alley behind a parking structure, 2 blocks from where a black SUV idled with its headlights off, and she'd had exactly long enough to register the wrongness of the skyline before her voice through a bullhorn told her not to move. She went invisible on instinct, the field wrapping around her like cool water, and she expected the usual reaction to that, a beat of confusion, a search pattern, men calling out to each other about where she'd gone. Instead, the bullhorn voice said, almost bored, "Anomalies gone optic null, converge on thermal," and within 4 seconds a second team had rounded the corner with handheld scanners already up and sweeping, painting the air in slow red arcs, hunting not for her shape but for the absence where her shape should be. She had never, in any version of her life, been hunted by people who already had a procedure for her. Sue moved low along the wall, matching the rhythm of the scanners, learning their sweep, the way she'd learned 1,000 other patterns under pressure, and slipped past the second team into a loading dock, stacked with crates stamped Vought International. Tactical Division, the logo a stylized eagle she didn't recognize wearing a halo she found, even in that moment, faintly grotesque. Behind her she heard one agent radio in, flat and procedural. Negative contact. Recommend FBSA flag. File as unregistered Class 2. Optics-based. Standard bulletin. Class 2. Standard bulletin. The words had the texture of a system that had filed thousands of these reports before hers. A machine with a slot built for exactly her shape of impossible, and the speed of it chilled her more than the search itself had. Back home, invisibility was hers. Private, a power she chose to reveal or withhold on her own terms, the literal architecture of her name. Here, it had already been assigned a tax bracket. She held herself still in the shadow of the crates until the teams moved off, then let the field drop just enough to check her own hands in the dark, solid and present and entirely her own, and allowed herself one slow breath. This was not a city that would ask who she was before deciding what to do with her. It had decided already, on sight, on signature, on the simple administrative fact of her existing without a form attached. A side door clanged open behind her, and she went invisible again on reflex. But the woman who stepped out wasn't wearing a uniform. She was younger than Sue expected, blonde, dressed like she'd come from a gym or a photo shoot, or possibly both, and she didn't sweep the dock with a scanner. She just stood very still and said, quietly to the empty air, "You can drop it. I'm not gonna call anyone." Sue stayed silent, weighing the math of trust against the math of exposure, and the woman went on, unhurried, like she had all the patience in the world and had used it before on people exactly this nervous. "My name's Annie. I know you're there because the wind's not moving right where you're standing, and because the FBSA truck 2 minutes ago means somebody clocked something, and somebody usually means a person, not a glitch." She held both hands open, slow, deliberate, the universal posture of someone proving they weren't reaching for anything. "I'm a Supe. The good kind, or I'm trying to be, which in this town is basically its own job description. You're not from a lab. You're not Vort's. I can tell because Vort's people don't look this scared and this steady at the same time. That's a person who's used to handling fear, not causing it." Sue let herself become visible by degrees, testing the woman's stillness as she did, finding no flinch in it. "You're risking something, talking to me like this." "Yeah," Annie said simply. "I do that more than I should." A pause, weighing something of her own. "Look, whatever you are, wherever you're from, you do not want Vort's people to find you before you find people you can actually trust. I know maybe 3 of those in this whole company. If you've got somewhere safe, go there. If you don't..." She hesitated, glancing once toward the mouth of the alley. "There are people who help with exactly this. Off the books. Hard to find on purpose. I can get a message to them if you want it sent." It was, Sue realized, the first offer she'd been given since arriving in this version of the world that wasn't shaped like a trap. And that fact alone told her more about the woman in front of her than any explanation could have. She thought of Reed somewhere in this city, doing calculations he had no data for, of Johnny burning too bright too fast, of Ben learning the hard way what this place did with bodies like his, and she made the decision the way she always made the decisions that mattered, quickly and without apology. "Send it," Sue said. "Tell them 4 people just arrived who don't belong to anyone, and we intend to keep it that way." It took Vort 11 hours to find all 4 of them, which Reed would later note, with the specific bitterness of a scientist watching his own data prove an uncomfortable point, was faster than it had taken him to find his own family. The summons arrived as 4 separate, simultaneous, almost courteous approaches. A car outside the motel, where Reed had been sketching containment math on motel stationery, a tailored suit waiting at the Harbor Authority office, where Ben had gone hunting for a map, a rooftop landing pad lit up like a runway for Johnny specifically, and For Sue, simply a calm woman in a blazer falling into step beside her on a sidewalk and saying, "Mrs. Storm, we'd like 15 minutes of your time. And we already know enough about you that pretending otherwise will only waste both our afternoons." By evening, all four of them were in the same room for the first time since the accident, and the relief of that reunion lasted exactly as long as it took Reed to notice the room itself. 40 floors up, glass on 3 sides. A conference table built for people who signed things, and across from them, a man in a flag print suit who introduced himself with a handshake too firm, and a smile that did not, Reed noted with the same instinct that had once told him not to trust a reactor reading, reach his eyes. "Homelander," the man said, like the name was a gift he was handing out personally. "I run the 7. "Well, I am the 7, but don't tell the others I said that." He laughed at his own joke alone, then sat, unbothered by the silence. "You 4 have caused quite a week. Unregistered incident reports stacking up across 3 boroughs, an FBSA bulletin, a hot dog cart fire that's already got 40,000 views. Vought doesn't love surprises, but Vought loves opportunity. And 4 of you, walking in together, no paper trail, no known origin. That's not a problem to us." "That's a launch. We're not looking for a launch," Reed said. Even and careful, the tone he used on funding committees who wanted more than he was willing to give them. "Everybody says that the first meeting." Homelander slid a folder across the table, thick, bound, a Vought eagle embossed on the cover. "Standard contract, generous, housing, training, full medical, a publicist who'll make sure the story's told right instead of told by some kid with a phone and 40,000 views and 0 context. We protect our own." His eyes moved over each of them in turn, cataloging, the way Reed cataloged variables. "Ben, was it? We could do a lot with you. Tragic, durable, sympathetic. Audiences love a monster with a heart, properly framed." Ben's jaw tightened, the sound of stone grinding faintly audible, but he said nothing, which Reed understood as the loudest possible answer Ben Grimm was capable of giving. "And you," Homelander went on, turning to Johnny with the specific warmth reserved for the easiest cell in the room. "You're already halfway to famous. Few weeks of training, a costume that isn't, no offense, on fire constantly, and you're a top 5 name by Christmas." "I'd know. I've been top 5 for 15 years running. I don't need training to fly," Johnny said, and Reed caught the edge under the bravado. The same edge he'd heard on the boardwalk replay through Johnny's own retelling an hour earlier. Somebody else's hand already reaching for the controls of his name. Supes hadn't spoken yet, and Homelander noticed that too, turning the full weight of his attention on her, like a spotlight finding its mark. Invisible. That's rarer than people think. Useful in ways the others aren't. His smile didn't change, but something underneath it did. A faint recalculation Reed recognized because he did the same math himself, constantly, instinctively. What is the most efficient use of this resource? We'd find work for that. Discreet work. The kind that doesn't make the news, which frankly is worth more to us than the kind that does. "We haven't agreed to anything," Sue said, even, unhurried, the same stillness she'd used on Annie in the alley. "No," Homelander agreed. And for the first time something colder moved behind the smile. Brief as a blink, gone before it could be called an expression at all. Not yet. He closed the folder himself, unbothered, a man accustomed to patience because he had never once needed urgency to get what he wanted. "Take the night. Talk it over. Families do that." His eyes settled on Reed last and lingered. "Though I have to say, Dr. Richards, your file's thin. Thinnest I've ever seen on someone this capable. No degree on record, no lab, no funding history, nothing. In my experience, The people with no paper trail at all are either nobody or they're hiding something worth a great deal more than a contract. He stood, smoothing his jacket, entirely at ease. I find I'm very patient with people who are hiding something good. He left them alone with the folder, the glass, and the 40-story view of a city that had already decided, 11 hours into their arrival, exactly what each of them was worth. Annie found Sue in the women's restroom down the hall from the conference room, which was, Sue would later admit, a genuinely clever place to have a conversation no one was supposed to overhear, since Vought had apparently not yet found a profitable reason to put cameras inside the stalls. Annie checked the room with a glance and a held breath, the practiced motion of someone who had done this exact maneuver more than once, then leaned against the sink across from Sue with her arms crossed. "You're considering it," Annie said. "Not a question. Reed isn't. Ben isn't. Johnny might for about a week before he gets bored of the leash." Sue ran the tap, mostly for the sound of it. "I'm the one who has to think about what happens to the rest of them if we say no, and they decide no isn't an option they're willing to offer." "Smart," Annie said. And there was no flattery in it, just recognition, one careful person to another. Most people sign because they're scared, or because the money's real, and it is, by the way, the money's very real. I signed for both reasons, and I was 17 and I didn't understand yet what I was actually agreeing to. She picked at a chip in the sink's edge, not meeting Sue's eyes for a second. "I'm going to tell you what I wish somebody'd told me, and you can do whatever you want with it." Sue shut off the tap and waited. The contract isn't really about housing and training, even though that's the part they put in bold. It's about ownership. Of your story, mostly. They decide what happened to you and why, and once that version's out there, in print, on a billboard, in some streaming doc with somber music, it doesn't matter what actually happened anymore. That becomes the truth, because they paid for the loudest microphone and nobody else gets one. Annie's voice stayed level, but something tightened around her eyes. "You said earlier you don't belong to anyone. I believe you. But the second you sign, that's not true anymore, no matter how it's worded, and getting it back after." She stopped herself, recalibrated. "It's not impossible. It's just expensive in ways that don't show up on the paperwork." "Is that what happened to you?" "That's what's happening to me," Annie said. Simple, present tense, and let that sit. "I do my job. I try to do some good inside it. I've got people I trust who help me do more good than the job alone would let me. But every single day I put on the suit, I'm also putting on a story Vought wrote for me. And most days the gap between the suit and the story is the loneliest place I know." She exhaled, shook it off visibly, the way someone resets their own posture before walking back into a room. "I'm not telling you not to sign. I don't know your situation. I don't know what you four are running from or running toward. And honestly, the less I know, the safer that probably is for everybody. I'm telling you what it costs, so at least you're choosing with your eyes open instead of just hers." Hers. His PR director set this meeting up 2 hours before Homelander even walked in. "Trust me," the smiles rehearsed. "The contract was drafted before any of you landed. They had a slot ready and you happened to fill it." Annie checked the door again, an old habit surfacing. "The people I mentioned before. The ones who'd help, off the books. They're not perfect and they're definitely not safe in the comfortable sense. But they don't want anything from you except the truth, and around here that's rarer than it should be. If you ever need them, you ask for Butcher. Just the name. Somebody'll know how to find him." "Butcher," Sue repeated, filing it the way she filed every variable Reed hadn't accounted for yet. "Don't say it loud in this building." Annie almost smiled, the first real one Sue had seen from her. And don't tell your family I told you. Some doors only open once, and I'd rather they open for you when you actually need them, not get burned because somebody mentioned a name in the wrong elevator. Sue studied her for a long moment. The careful posture, the rehearsed calm laid thin over something that hadn't been calm in a long time, and recognized in her, unexpectedly, a version of the choice Sue herself had been turning over for the last hour. How much of yourself you could put on for the world's sake before the performance and the person underneath stopped being two separate things. Why help us at all? You don't know us. You don't know what we are. No, Annie agreed. But I know what Vought does to things it can't categorize, and I know what it costs to watch that happen and do nothing. She pushed off the sink, straightening, already half back into the posture of someone about to walk past cameras. Take the night. Talk to your family. Whatever you decide it because it's actually what you want, not because the room was built to make you feel like there wasn't a door. She was gone before Sue could answer, the door swinging shut behind her on a hallway full of people who, Sue now understood with total clarity, were each performing a version of themselves that Vought had written long before any of them had a say in the matter. The staged rescue happened on a Tuesday, which Ben would later find almost funny, because nothing about that day had felt like it belonged on a Tuesday. An ordinary little word for what turned out to be the day. Vought decided exactly how much of him it was willing to own. It started with a phone call to the suite they'd been given. An actual phone, the old kind with a cord, which Reed found almost touching in its anachronism, until he realized it meant the room had been wired for something else as well. A woman's voice, bright and efficient, explained that there'd been a small fire at a daycare in Queens, nothing serious, already mostly contained, but it would mean a great deal to the families, and to Vought, and frankly to Ben's own introduction to the public, if he happened to be there when the cameras arrived. A car would come get him in 20 minutes. They want me to play hero, Ben said to the room, flat, already knowing the shape of what was coming, because he had lived this exact script once before. A long time ago, in a life that had taught him precisely how these things were dressed up to look like rescue, and were actually rehearsal. It's good optics, Reed said carefully, not quite arguing for it, more turning it over the way he turned over any new variable. If we're going to buy time to find a way home, cooperation that costs us nothing might be the safer. It costs something, Ben said. It always costs something. That's the whole trick of it. He went anyway, because refusing outright felt, in that moment, like a fight he wasn't ready to pick yet. And some small, traitorous part of him wanted to know if this version of the world would treat him any different than the last one had. The daycare fire was real, barely, a kitchen grease flare, already knocked down to embers by the time he arrived. 2 firefighters standing around, looking faintly embarrassed at having their afternoon hijacked. The cameras were already set up. Someone had arranged 3 children near the entrance, not in danger, just positioned, the way a photographer arranges a bowl of fruit, and a producer with a clipboard and a headset met Ben at the curb with the specific cheerful urgency of someone running behind schedule. "Okay, big guy, here's the beat," she said, not looking up from the clipboard. "You go in. You come out carrying the little girl in the red jacket. She's totally fine. Her mum's right there. But we want the visual. You understand. Strong arms, scary face turned gentle. That's the whole story we're telling today. You don't even have to say anything. We'll voice it over." "There's nobody in there," Ben said. "There's a story in there," she corrected, finally looking up, and her smile did not waver even slightly. "That's the part that matters. People don't remember facts, they remember feelings, And right now the feeling we need from you is gentle giant, misunderstood, secretly soft. That's your whole brand, day one. Get it right, and you'll never have to audition for sympathy again. I'm not auditioning for anything. Everybody's auditioning, the producer said, not unkindly. The exact tired patience of someone who had delivered this same correction to dozens of Supes before him. That's just the job. Ben looked at the little girl in the red jacket, who was watching him with the open, uncomplicated curiosity kids, reserved for things that didn't fit any category they'd learned yet. And he thought about every camera that had ever pointed at him back home, expecting him to perform a tragedy on command. The monster who used to be a man. Look how sad, look how brave, look how good we are for tolerating him. He had spent years clawing his way out from under that exact story, and here it was again, wearing a clipboard and a headset, offering it to him fresh as though it were a gift. No, Ben said. The producer blinked, genuinely startled, as though the word hadn't been part of any version of this conversation she'd rehearsed. I'm sorry. I said no. I'll stand here all day if there's an actual fire. I'm not picking up a kid who isn't in danger so you can put a voiceover on it. He turned and walked back toward the car, and behind him he heard the producer already on her headset, voice gone clipped and businesslike, the warmth switched off like a stage light. Yeah, he's a no-go. The rock one's a no-go. Tell them we'll need a different angle for the launch, maybe lean into the difficult angle instead. Broody, untamed, we can still sell that. By the time Ben got back to the suite, the contract on the table had a new clause in it, freshly printed, and Reed's face when he read it told Ben everything he needed to know before a single word was spoken aloud. The document no longer described Ben as an asset to be developed. It described him, in language gentler than the intent behind it, as a liability requiring containment protocols, and underneath that careful corporate phrasing, all four of them understood exactly what kind of conversation Vought was already having about him in some room they weren't allowed into. Homelander came to them this time, instead of summoning them, which Reed understood immediately as a different kind of pressure than the conference room had been, the casual menace of a man who didn't need a table between himself and the people he was negotiating with because he had never once needed the table to win. He found Reed alone on the suite's small balcony, 40 floors up, the city humming below in a register Reed still hadn't learned to read. Your friend made a scene today, Homelander said, leaning on the railing beside him, conversational, as though commenting on weather. Producers pissed. Producers get pissed, it's their whole personality. But it got me thinking about something that's been bothering me since our first meeting. He turned, and the smile was still there, but it had the fixed quality of something painted on, rather than felt. Your file. I had people look harder. No birth record I can find anywhere in this country. No school, no employer, no landlord, nothing. Your friend Sue, same story. The fire one's even worse, not even a ghost of a paper trail, like he was invented yesterday. He said it lightly, but his eyes didn't move from Reed's face. I've met unregistered Supes before. They've got pasts, even messy ones. You four don't have a past at all. That's not unregistered. That's something else. We value our privacy, Reed said. Even. The same tone he used defending a hypothesis he knew was thin. Everybody says that too. Homelander's gaze drifted out over the skyline, almost lazy. Here's what I think, Doctor. And you can correct me. I think you're not from around here. Not from another state. Not from off the books. I think you're not from anywhere I've got a map for. He let that hang, watching for the flinch, and Reed gave him none. Years of containment room composure finally earning its keep. I've heard rumors my whole career. Other places, other versions of things, Always figured it was nonsense people told themselves to feel special. But I look at you and I look at that thin little file, and I think maybe nonsense just walked into my building wearing a lab coat. If you already believe what you're saying, Reed said carefully, nothing I tell you will change your mind, and if you don't, then nothing I tell you will matter either way. Homelander laughed, short and genuinely delighted, the laugh of a man who just heard a joke land better than he expected. I like you. Most people start lying immediately. You're doing something smarter. You're not telling me anything at all and hoping I get bored. He straightened off the railing, all the casual warmth gone in an instant, replaced by something flat and assessing. I'm not gonna get bored, Doctor. But here's the thing. I also don't actually need to know where you're from. I just need to know you're useful and contained and mine. The where is curiosity. The what happens next, that's business. He tapped 2 fingers against the railing, a small, almost idle gesture that nonetheless made the metal groan faintly under the pressure. So, new offer, simpler than the last one. Whatever you are, wherever you came from, that part stays yours. Nobody asks again. In exchange, you 4 work for me. Not Vought, not the brand, me, personally. I look good, I get useful tools nobody else has, and your secret, whatever it actually is, dies in this conversation. He smiled again, warmer now, persuasive. Best deal you're gonna get in this city, Doctor. I'd take it. Reed said nothing for a long moment, running the calculation the only way he knew how, weighing the cost of a lie that bought silence against the cost of a truth that bought nothing at all. And when he answered, the words came out smooth, unhurried, entirely false. There's no secret, Homelander. We're researchers. A funding dispute went badly. We went underground rather than hand our work to people who'd misuse it. That's the whole story. Disappointing, I know. Homelander studied him a moment longer, and something in his expression suggested he didn't fully believe it, didn't need to, that the lie itself had told him something true, regardless, that Reed would rather construct an elaborate fiction than hand over one real fact, and that told Homelander, more clearly than any answer could have, exactly how valuable the real answer must be. Disappointing, Homelander agreed, pleasant as ever, and left without another word, and Reed stood alone on the balcony with the distinct, sinking understanding that he had just bought them time at a price he hadn't fully tallied yet. When he turned back inside, Sue was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, and the look on her face told him she'd heard enough of it to know exactly what he'd done. You lied to him. I lied to him, Reed agreed. You didn't tell us you were going to do that. There wasn't time to debate it as a family. Sue, he was standing right there. That's not the point, Reed. Her voice stayed quiet, which was somehow worse than if she'd raised it. The point is, we're the only 4 people in this entire world who know the truth about where we came from. And you just decided, alone, what story the rest of us are going to have to keep straight from now on. That's not strategy. That's you deciding, again, that the rest of us don't need the whole picture to function. She held his gaze a beat longer, then turned back into the suite, and Reed stood there in the doorway's wake. Understanding that whatever ground he'd bought with Homelander, he'd spent some of it from an account that belonged to his family. And that particular debt didn't come with a contract he could read the fine print on. The containment incident, when it came, arrived dressed as an accident which Reed recognized the moment the building's fire suppression system triggered with no fire anywhere near it, flooding the 38th floor with foam and alarms, and a stampede of evacuating staff that conveniently separated the 4 of them from any witness who might later describe what actually happened next. He understood, in the half-second before the lights cut, that Vought had stopped trying to buy them and started trying to take inventory by force, and that whatever came through those doors would not be negotiating. It was Black Noir who came through first, silent, fast, already inside Ben's reach before anyone had time to call a warning, and the two of them went through a load-bearing wall in a single motion, plaster and rebar, raining down into the floor below. Ben rolled with the impact better than a man his size should have been able to, came up already swinging. And the fight that followed was the first real one this city had seen from him. No cameras arranging the angle, no producer narrating the feeling, just two enormously durable things, testing exactly how much force the other could absorb before something gave. Noir didn't speak. Ben found that worse than if he had. Above them, Johnny met Homelander in open air over the building's exposed upper terrace. And the difference in that fight was immediate and humiliating. Homelander simply absorbing a blast of concentrated flame that would have leveled a city block, and not so much as singeing the cape he wasn't even wearing, smiling the entire time like a man enjoying a sparring session with a child. "That's it," he said almost gently, and backhanded Johnny sideways through the air, hard enough to crater a parked transport van 3 streets over. Johnny came up burning hotter than he'd ever pushed himself, furious now rather than playful, and understood with sudden sick clarity that this was not a fight he could win on raw output, that he was going to have to be smarter than he'd ever needed to be back home, where outclassing the room had always been an option available to him. Queen Maeve found Sue in a stairwell, and Sue's first instinct, invisibility, bought her exactly 4 seconds before Maeve simply began tearing through the stairwell's structure itself, ripping handrails free and flinging debris into the space where Sue's last known position had been, a brute force solution to an invisible problem that nonetheless worked with horrifying efficiency, forcing Sue to abandon stealth and throw up a force field instead, catching a length of twisted steel mid-air and feeling the impact travel all the way up through her arms, even through the shield. "There you are," Maeve said, almost approving, and came at the field directly, testing it, probing for the edges the way a predator tests a fence. And Reed found a train everywhere at once, a blur circling the floor faster than sound, knocking equipment, knocking Reed himself twice before Reed had even registered the first hit landing, an opponent whose entire advantage was a kind of speed Reed's body simply could not track in real time. He took a third hit hard enough to crack a support pillar he'd been thrown into. And in the half-second of recovery that followed, lying in rubble with his ears ringing, Reed did the only thing he had ever reliably been able to do under pressure. He stopped trying to fight the variable directly and started solving for it instead. He watched the next pass, just watched, ignoring the urge to flinch, cataloging not a train's speed but his pattern, the predictable loop a fast thing falls into when it assumes speed alone guarantees the win, and on the 4th pass, Reed didn't dodge at all. He stretched, full length, the whole width of the room, both arms forming a single low taut line at exactly the height A-Train's legs would cross, and the speedster hit it at a velocity that turned Reed's stretched body into something closer to a tripwire than a man, sending A-Train cartwheeling into a bank of monitors hard enough to actually slow him down for the first time since the fight began. "Now," Reed shouted, the single most important word he said all day, and the others heard it the way a team that had fought together 1,000 times would have heard it instantly, instinctively, even 4 people who had never coordinated in this particular arena before. Johnny dove from the terrace, fight straight down through the stairwell shaft, trailing flame to blind Maeve's sightline just long enough for Sue to drop her field, and catch Maeve from below with a focused, brutal burst of force that sent her crashing up rather than down, buying Sue the half-second she needed to get clear. Ben, bleeding from a dozen places and grinning through a cracked jaw, used the distraction to finally land a hit on Noir that actually staggered him. The silent man going briefly, satisfyingly off balance. It wasn't a victory. None of it was clean. None of it was the kind of fight that ended with the seven retreating in any real sense. And Reed understood that even as he called the regroup, that they had bought seconds, not safety, that Homelander hadn't even bothered to use his full strength yet, and the others knew it too. But for one suspended moment, four people who had fallen into this world separately and alone stood back to back in a wrecked corridor, 40 floors above a city that didn't know what to do with any of them and held a line that should not have been holdable, and that, Reed thought, bruised and breathless and entirely unsure they'd survive the next 60 seconds, was the first thing that had felt like home since they'd arrived. The boys didn't arrive to save anyone, which Butcher would have been the first to clarify if anyone had bothered asking him, and the first sign of their presence wasn't a dramatic entrance, but a building-wide power failure that dropped every floor into emergency lighting at once. Cutting the feed on 3 different cameras, Vought had quietly running throughout the engagement. Reed noticed it immediately. The abrupt absence of the faint electronic hum he'd been unconsciously cataloging since the fight began, and understood that someone else had just walked into this building with an agenda that had nothing to do with either side currently trying to kill each other in the stairwell. Huey found them first, of all people crouched behind a server rack on the 37th floor, with a tactical case full of compromising material he'd clearly come to retrieve regardless of who was fighting whom upstairs. And he looked at the 4 of them, bloodied and strange and entirely unfamiliar, with the particular flat exhaustion of a man who had stopped being surprised by anything Vaught's building produced years ago. "You're not on any list I've seen," he said, mostly to himself, already moving past them toward a server bank. "We're not on any list anywhere," Ben said, which was, of everything said in that building all day, the most honest sentence anyone had managed. "Cool. Good. Means nobody's gonna come looking for you specifically when this place loses about 6 months of dirt in the next 90 seconds. Huey didn't even look up from the case. "Whatever you're doing, finish it fast, because in about a minute, Homelander's gonna realize his evidence locker just walked out the back, and he is going to be in an extremely bad mood about it. That single piece of information turned out to be worth more than any weapon any of them had used all day. Homelander, arriving a floor below to find a train concussed against a bank of dead monitors, and Maeve, favoring one arm, took exactly 4 seconds to register the deeper, more personal violation happening above him. The years of leverage he'd quietly accumulated on half the building's executives, apparently, now in transit toward people who would absolutely use it, and the calculation on his face shifted visibly from contain the anomalies to recover what actually matters to me. He looked at the 4 of them one last time, weighing and made the choice every cornered predator eventually makes when a second prize matters more than the first. "This isn't over," he said, which Reed noted was the single least original sentence the man had spoken all day. And then he was gone, Maeve and a limping A-train peeling off after him, Black Noir vanishing without ceremony the way he'd arrived. The building, impossibly, was simply theirs again. They found Annie on the roof 20 minutes later, having apparently spent the entire fight quietly redirecting 2 FBSA units away from the building's perimeter under a story about a gas leak that nobody had bothered to verify. she looked at the four of them, scorched and limping and unmistakably victorious in the specific bruised way that didn't photograph well and didn't ask what they were. She'd clearly decided, sometime in the last hour, that the answer mattered less than the fact that they'd just made Vort's night considerably worse without her having to lift a finger. Butcher says you can use the safe house in Red Hook, she said. No questions asked. That's rare coming from him. He usually has at least 4 questions. Tell him we appreciate the restraint, Reed said. Tell him yourself. He's allergic to gratitude. It confuses him. She studied them a moment longer, weighing something. Whatever you 4 actually are, and I've stopped trying to guess, for the record, you walked away from the 7 tonight. That doesn't happen. People don't walk away from the 7. We didn't walk away, Sue said, quiet, steady, the first thing she'd said since the fight ended. We made it not worth their time to keep us. Theirs is difference. Annie almost smiled at that, something tired and genuine passing across her face. Yeah, there is. She glanced toward the city, the lights of it spread out indifferent and enormous below them. For what it's worth, that's the smartest move anybody's made against that building in years. Most people think the win is beating them. The actual win is becoming too expensive to bother with. They left before dawn, the 4 of them, on foot, no escort, no contract. No name anywhere on Vort's books that matched what had happened in that building. And somewhere in the climb down from the roof, Ben fell into step beside Reed, the 2 of them bruised in entirely different registers, and said the thing none of them had quite managed to say since the accident. We didn't get a deal, Ben said. Didn't sign anything. Didn't give him the truth either. No, Reed agreed. That's the part I like best, Ben said. And for once there was no bitterness anywhere in it. Whole city built on owning people who can't be owned, and we just walked out the front door, belonging to exactly nobody but each other. He looked at Reed sideways, the closest thing to forgiveness he had to offer for the lie on the balcony. Figure out how we get home yet? Working on it, Reed said, which was true, and which was also, for the first time since they'd fallen into this world, not the most important thing he had to say. Sue, about the balcony. I know, she said, before he could finish it, and there was warmth under the steel in it now, hard-won and real. Just don't decide alone again. That's the whole deal, Reed. That's always been the whole deal. And the 4 of them walked on into a city that still had no name for what it had just lost. 4 people with no file, no number, no logo stitched anywhere across them, carrying nothing out of that tower except each other, which, against every system that City had built to prevent exactly that outcome, turned out to be the one thing it had never figured out how to buy. Vort never got its launch. No billboard, no Funko, no documentary with somber music narrating the tragic monster or the Flame Boy brand. Just a quietly buried incident report, 4 blank entries where evidence should have been, and a building full of executives who learned to stop asking questions out loud. Homelander told himself he'd let them go on his own terms. He hadn't, and some small, unkillable part of him knew it, which was its own kind of wound he'd carry into every smile from then on. Annie kept her 3 trusted names and added a 4th category entirely, people Vort could and price. The boys filed the night away as a win they didn't fully understand and didn't need to. For the 4, the city never explained where they'd come from, because Reed never let it, and that silence became its own kind of armor. Ben stopped flinching at cameras. He could simply walk past now. Sue and Reed rebuilt something steadier than before, forged in one honest argument instead of 100 unspoken ones. Somewhere below them, the city kept selling heroism by the pound, never once learning the names of the 4 people who'd proven, for one night, that not everything extraordinary comes with a price tag attached. The multiverse never sleeps. More crossovers await.